Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians, your backstage pass to Melbourne's vibrant music scene. Recorded on a cosy couch in Brunswick, join us as we explore what it truly means to be a musician and speak to the diverse talents that make music in our city. Our guest today, Elliot Lamb, is a talented trombonist, vocalist and composer who has carved out a significant place in the local jazz scene and beyond. With a Bachelor of Music from Monash University, majoring in jazz and contemporary performance on the trombone, Ellie has risen to become an in-demand session musician, celebrated for their exceptional brass skills. Their performances, often found in jazz and jazz-adjacent contexts, also extend to pop and soul, demonstrating their versatile skills and repertoire in both original projects and supporting roles. Ellie's compositional expertise was further developed last year with the recording of their suite Between Worlds, following its commission debut at the Melbourne International Jazz Festival in 2021. Furthermore, their integral role in the Jazzlab Orchestra's debut album Cloud Gazing highlights their talents not just as a performer, but also in composition, notably with the album's 5/4 title track, Cloud Gazing. Join us as we delve into Ellie's musical journey, from the practice rooms of jazz school to becoming a featured artist and a regular presence in Melbourne's music scene and beyond. We want to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land in which this podcast was recorded. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
Ellie, what does it mean to be a musician to you?
That is such an excellent question. There's so many different ways to answer it that are all great. And I think the most distilled and obvious version is if you make music, you're a musician, right? I think there are plenty of ways to personalize that and add modifiers to it that become relevant to different people and different ways of musicking. But I think it's easy to overcomplicate it, and it's easy for people to feel that you need to do something in particular with musicking to be a musician. But I think that, if you make music, if you engage with music, you can call yourself a musician. You can feel like a musician. You can engage with that label, So I make music, and so I'm a musician, And then from there, people talk about being a professional musician, and to me that just means I get to make money off it, which is a boon in a capitalist world, or people talk about being a serious musician or a jazz musician or a pop musician or a whatever, and I think those are all fascinating and wonderful distinctions and interesting things to move around and move between. But yeah, I think it's easy to invalidate what it means to be a musician if you put any kind of further restriction on it as well. So I think, for me, being a musician is just making music, and I do that as much as I can and in as many contexts as I can. And it means a different thing to me on a different day as well, or in a different gig or in a different session, or, depending on what's going on, depending on what dog's on my lap. G'day, Scout.
Yeah, sorry about Scout. She just wants to be involved in the podcast.
And who can blame her? It's an excellent time. With an excellent jingle, by the way. Thoroughly enjoyed that.
Oh, thank you. I guess I wanted to ask, you do quite a lot of different things, but the trombone, where did that come from?
That is a great question as well, because it's a silly instrument, isn't it? When I stop and think about what I do for a living, it's quite a ridiculous mechanical thing, just blowing through a piece of pipe and changing the length of it, But I always loved music. I loved to tinker with things when I was young. My mum had a piano in the house, which was awesome, and I had no idea what I was doing, and no desire to know what I was doing necessarily. I never kind of went, oh, how do you do this right? I just kind of pressed things and then made music, and it was great. And at some point someone bought me a ukulele, and I again didn't know what I was doing, just tuned the strings to notes that I liked and would pluck things out. But I was always interested and curious, and I think curious is probably the main one, really. I just wanted to play with sound and see what I could do, and I was always singing, and my parents had a fireplace in the lounge room with a little brick ledge in front of it. I'd put on a CD and that'd be a little stage, and I'd sing along with CDs or whatever. So just making music was very obvious pastime for me, and I joined the National Children's Choir when I was, I think, 8 or 9, and sang in that, and loved that. I loved singing choir. It was awesome. I was always making music very young, and when I was about 10, so started grade 5, it's a guy, Andrew McAllister, who I kind of went around. I grew up out in Belgrave and was going around the local primary schools, and he offered, music tuition on a range of sort of concert bands instruments, so a number of brass and woodwind instruments, percussion. And so he just had an array of them, brought them into school one day to do some, like, show them off and say, if anyone wants to, sign up for some lessons, these are the instruments we teach. And, there was a bit of a trial period where you could try a few different ones over a few weeks, and then if you want to play one, you'd sort of sign up. And I came home from school really excited. I looked at them all, these look amazing. And I was instantly drawn to, like, sort of the trumpet, the saxophone, like kind of the bigger, obviously saxophone's not a brass instrument, but that kind of, shiny, brassy, loud world of instruments. But I couldn't sort of remember what most of them were called, or, I didn't have a good understanding of them. I came home and I was like, I want to play the tuba. Mum was like, what? Wow. That is big. I was just like, I just want to play one of them, brass is great. But yeah, went into school the next couple of weeks and had a honk on the saxophone, had to play on the trumpet, had to play on the trombone. And like made a pretty good sound on the trombone first try, just kind of, made that beautiful sound, and so that was pretty fun. And yeah, Andrew sort of went, well, look, like if you like them all, and obviously, as now a music teacher, part of it, the recruitment is like trying to fill your bands, and so I can look at it and be like, look, he probably just needed more trombonists in band. But he was also like, look, there are just like everyone needs trombones all the time, in bands. There's always a million saxophones, but often bands are short trombonists, so there are just a lot of opportunities just to get in and play.
Yeah, right.
It's a bit less competitive, and it's a cool instrument, and you can obviously make a sound on it. So if you're struggling to decide, like, play whatever you want, but if you're struggling to decide, keep that in mind. And I went, oh, that sounds pretty good. And I was the kind of kid who liked to do something a bit out of left field. Like, I was in the recorder ensemble at school, and my pride and joy was playing the bass recorder,
Okay.
So it's like, I like to do the thing that was a bit left to center anyway, and I was like, nah, that sounds good. Let's do this. And yeah, I loved it. Loved learning things, and it came reasonably naturally. And I think as someone who had been singing for a while, because it's it's kind of like a fretless bass, right, or an upright bass, where there's no frets and there's no keys. It's just like you just got to kind of know spatially where the notes are, where the semitones are. It's all very precisely imprecise, in a way.
Yeah.
But I think as a singer, it kind of makes sense, right? Your voice also doesn't have frets on it, and you just learn to feel it and hear it and adjust. And so sort of, I think it made sense to me from that point of view, although I didn't rationalize it that way at the time, but thinking back on it. But yeah, I just loved it. And the best thing about it was that the way that he sort of taught was he'd come and you'd have a few lessons and kind of get your first few notes. And then he'd say, cool, you know what you're doing a bit now. Thursday night's band, So there was just this community band that was all these kids from all these schools around the hills. And there's like variously anywhere between probably 40 and 60 kids. And there were 3 concert bands sort of tiered up, so you'd get into the baby band, and then once you could play a bit better, you'd sort of work your way up. And it was just primary school kids, so just like 3 really solid concert bands. And put on concerts a couple times a year, and do what was then the Melbourne School Bands Festival, and it's now VSMF, the Victorian School Music Festival. And we just play,
Yeah.
And he had a real knack for like that kind of American style band system where you all just sit there and you learn by doing and learn by playing, and you just naturally kind of learn what transposing instruments are, and not that the trombone is one, but understanding that all these instruments have these different roles to play, and he had these really fun ways of engaging young people in music making that I found really engaging. And yeah, I loved being in band, and I made some lifelong friends. One of my best friends, Andrew, was like, oh, I think you and Jess will get along, put us into band at the same time. He and Jess, she'd been playing for a few months longer than me, I think, or been in the band a few months longer, or it's like, Jess, here, look after Elle, they're new, but I feel like you guys will get on. And yeah, we're still best mates, but it was just one of those things where suddenly I found all these people that I was like and that I got along with. So I think the big appeal was musicking together, and that remains to this day my main motivating force, in making music. It's about making music with people. It's about writing for other people to play with, or, running bands, whether it's in a professional sense or, at school, running school bands or running community bands, or, but seeing people come together and making music and being part of that process is still the thing that motivates me to keep doing it, much more than... I was never motivated to, just sit in my room and shed for the sake of being able to play something. Playing for the sake of it was never something that appealed to me. And I've got a lot of friends that was the thing that made them want to play, because they just really wanted to master certain techniques, certain pieces. And I madly respect that. I don't have the focus to do that unless there's a practical application. If it's like, oh, I really want to play this song with this ensemble.
Yes.
you know, as soon as there was something I couldn't do for a band, even as a kid, you'd be like, oh, well, I've got to get my part right. Like, I don't want to let the team down, and I want to be at my best, you know? So the motivation to work hard to achieve collectively was always there and remains there. But yeah, it was never about me personally being good for the sake of being good. That it was not an appealing thing. So band was very much the thing that drove me to get good, and especially in those kinds of programs and through high school, where it's like, okay, you're in this band, but you want to be in the good band, the senior band. So it was like, oh, I want to work hard because I want to play the good, you know, with the good kids and play the hard music, and you know. So I was always very driven by the possibility of those experiences. But yeah, so like trombone was just a great vehicle to do that. And you know, once I got to high school, that local music community had a stage band that I went and played in, and then got to school and joined everything I could. And yeah, there's like Andrew's suggestion of like, yeah, everyone needs trombones was true, because I was in the orchestra and the concert bands and the smaller groups and the stage band, you know, I just played in everything, which was great. Yeah. So it just opened a lot of doors. But yeah, there was always a spot, and there was always somewhere to play. You know, so I was playing a lot and thoroughly. Yeah, I just always loved being in that environment, loved being on stage, and yeah, but not necessarily. You know, I mean, I've got a healthy dose of ego and liking to be on stage because of that dopamine, but it's also the shared experience again, like that vibe on stage of that heightened emotion and the kind of electricity of it, of making music with someone, having a connection with someone in that environment is really cool. And yeah, I never stopped doing it, you know. And it never occurred to me, I think, to be a professional quote-unquote musician, which I think is where I've spent a lot of time grappling with what it means to be a musician over those years. Like, it's meant very different things to me at very different points. It's variously been a hobby, or the most important thing in my life, or taken a back seat, or, you know, it's always been there, but in very different ways. But I don't think I ever really pictured what it would be like, or that it could be something that I would do as a job. You know, when I was at school, it was just the thing I spent all my time doing, which is wild now. And even finished school, and I went and did an arts degree, which was great, and I think one of the best things I've done in my life. Just great to just go and learn to think and read critically and engage with a whole new group of people, and like it was awesome. I loved my arts degree. But you know, by the end of it, I was skipping out on class because someone had a gig, you know, or I was taking weekends and driving to Sydney or Adelaide or wherever to do gigs with my ska band, because that's what every horn player in their 20s did. Yeah. You know, for no money and sleeping on couches, but it was kind of awesome. But yeah, I just was always playing. And then at some point went, well, it'd be nice to be better at this and know what I'm doing a bit more, and went back and did my music degree. So yeah, it's like quite a winding road to, like, I would never have seen myself now where I am in my life 20 years ago. Yeah. It just was not even a path that I knew existed, you know. But that's kind of the fun of it, because I sort of found it just by following my nose and following what felt good and sounded good, and yeah, here I am.
Ah, it's awesome.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's quite special, the bonds you have from those like school bands, I think. And like, it sounds like that's really impacted you now, because you're like, I love playing with other people, and it's about the other people, and yeah, there's all the other things about like trying to get better and learn the pieces better, but you know, it's the communal experience of playing that really gets you going. And whilst you were talking about it, was reminding me of all the different school bands I played in, and all the different friends that I had from like the percussion section in the concert band, and the different fun that we would have in that year. But then I graduated to the next band, and then okay, now there's senior people, so I've got to practice a bit more to like fit in or to like play. And yeah, I think there's something special about that whole scene, like regardless of if you go on to like play music professionally like you do, just like for people to be involved in that whole like band scene throughout school, be it like the jazz or the classical or choral stuff. Totally. And I guess you've gone on to be involved in the Jazzlab Orchestra, which seems to be like another but adult version of the close, tight-knit community that surrounds like a band program, where you're playing with really amazing musicians, but you also, you know, have that bond of creating a space that is fun to like hang out with and push each other to build and grow. I'd love to hear more about like how you got involved with that and how it started, and you know, building up to where it's, you know, you guys put out your first album last year and you were writing tracks and playing on it, and Yeah, it seems like just such a great initiative, and I was wondering if it's like part of that, like, you know, having your own thing, but separate to the teaching, where you're helping others come up through a band program, but actually running like a super large, well, not super large, but a large ensemble of professional musicians and others that, like, you know, you can continue that same thing of having the special bonds to make music with others.
That's such a beautiful and insightful like summary of that band, and I've not stopped to consider it in that lineage. But you're like, as you were saying that, I was like, hell yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like, whether intentionally or not, it's exactly that experience. It's recapturing all that magic that I had. Yeah, I love that. It's giving me chills thinking about it. Like, I love that band. So yeah, the Jazzlab Orchestra was originally like an initiative of Cheryl Drumpisicle and Madison James Smith. So Mads had just kind of finished or was finishing his honours at the VCA in big band writing, like in composing, and written all these amazing big band charts. And they're not your mama's big band charts, you know, like it's not kind of your classic swingers and your AABA forms with a solo section and then a sax solo and then take the head out, you know, which are great, and I could play those all day and I love it. You know, I love big band music. That will always be the thing that made me love playing trombone. But they're just something else, you know. And Madison's, you know, other job when he's not, you know, hanging out with us is writing music for video games. And so he's got this very cinematic, kind of almost orchestral, you know. He and I joke that we studied jazz because of the instruments we played or because we liked contemporary music, but actually we've both got like a bit of an orchestral bone somewhere in our body, you know.
Okay.
Kind of, are we like, whoops, classical kids that ended up in the jazz stream? You know, there's this kind of blurring of that he and I share, you know. But he'd written all these beautiful charts that are really interesting and really cinematic and, yeah, quite unusual, I think, among big band music. But he's like, oh, now I just like need a big band to play them, kind of thing. And he was talking with Cheryl because she was doing her honours at VCA as well, and she's like, well, let's just bloody start a big band then, you know, because Cheryl is just the most incredible go-getter, you know. I have pipe dreams, Cheryl just has dreams, you know, and then she just makes them a reality, you know. If she can see that she wants something or that there's a need or a niche for something that she can fill, that she can envisage filling, she'll bloody go after it because she's amazing. And she's, you know, one of my heroes, has been since I met her in 2017. She's just awesome. So back when Bennett's Lane was a thing, like the classic Melbourne jazz club, they had the Bennett's Lane Big Band. And then eventually when Bennett's Lane was sadly kind of priced out of its city location, Michael reopened up in Brunswick as the Jazzlab in, I think it was 2017. I got this right in a trivia question a couple of weeks ago, and now I've forgotten what year it was. It was 2017-ish. And Cheryl kind of went to Michael and said, hey, you know how you used to have the Bennett's Lane Big Band? Well, I want to pitch you the Jazzlab Orchestra. And she's like, I'll assemble it, make it happen, if you'll give us a place to play. But the condition is, like, she's like, I'm determined to have an ensemble that is representative of the diversity of Melbourne's jazz scene, you know. And so she was, like, very eager to curate an ensemble that had, like, quite a mix of genders and experiences and universities that people studied at, and, you know, just, like, create a little 17-piece cross-section of the kind of up-and-coming jazz scene, you know, with no specific restriction on what that means, but just, like, you know, again, not your mama's band, just, like, people that maybe aren't your classic big band players either. The whole ensemble is, like, composers, improvisers, everyone's, you know, playing music in their own right, very actively, but in quite varied ways. So the original version of the Jazzlab Orchestra, Michael said, yeah, like, go for it. Let's do this thing, which was amazing.
Cool.
And so our first gig was as the opening event of the 2019 Melbourne International Jazz Festival. So there was a show at the Recital Centre, and we did the opening little set. Like, we did 4 tunes, 3 of Madison's and 1 of Cheryl's. And so, yeah, just bang, started with a bang at the Recital Centre, had a great gig, and then after that we had a monthly residency for the rest of the year at the Jazzlab. And I think at that time it was the last Wednesday of every month, or you know, it's changed a little bit. It took us a while to find our current situation, which has been going for years now, which is the last Tuesday of every month. But yeah, we had a monthly residency, so we did 5 more shows that year, I think, or however many more between. I think it was 5 more. July, August, September, October, November. And I don't know if we did a December show because often it falls around Christmas. But it was just awesome. And we had so much fun. And yeah, Cheryl's tune is wild. It's Resentful Indigestion, it was eventually called, when we, had to name it. And it's just incredible. And she's so passionate about writing music with like serious musicians and serious skills and like serious songwriting chops, but that don't take themselves seriously. And she's like, I don't even like the name that much, Resentful Indigestion, but that's just what it sounded like. And that's fine. Like, she's like, it's okay to not take ourselves seriously while still being serious, And she's such a master of it. And yeah, Madison's tunes are so incredible. And yeah, over time, like that year, I wrote Cloud Gazing, and Sean Rammers, who also, he and I now are a lot more involved in running the ensemble month to month and running some rehearsals and running, making sure we're organising enough personnel, and it's fantastic. So the four of us kind of admin the band. He's written this awesome piece called Let Me Make This Point, which is also on the album. They're all just so different to anything I've played before, and they all have all the trappings of big band techniques in terms of the voicings or the stylistic inspiration, but yeah, it's just quirky, fun music that, yeah, it's developed its own kind of sub-theme. And yeah, over the years, a few more people in the band, quite a few people subbed in and out over the years, but now it's got a really consistent personnel base and a really consistent base of depths that fill in, and every now and again we get someone new in as well. But there's a community of maybe 30 odd musicians who regularly play with the ensemble or who have regularly played with us. And it does feel like a community, And I think in 2019, at that time, I was a couple of years out of jazz degree, and I think even doing a degree in jazz, sort of linking back to Mads and I thinking that maybe we were a bit between the classical and jazz lands. I loved a lot of things about my degree, but I'm not that into bebop. I'm not that into a lot of kind of more typical jazz music. Not to a high degree. I like it. I think it's great, but I'm not like a real nerd about it. I was a real nerd for early jazz, like that really traditional stuff, for a long time. And since studying it, I've become really interested in very contemporary improvisers, and a lot of people who don't even necessarily associate with the word jazz, which I do have a complicated relationship with, just in terms of being, a white, non-binary person living in Melbourne in 2024. I don't know how much connection I can rightfully claim to Black American music, but undoubtedly everything I make is very strongly influenced by it, and I think it's important to pay respect and homage to that. But yeah, it's a complicated world, but modern improvisers, modern musicians, modern jazz musicians, I find that those voices very interesting as well. But a lot of the stuff I studied in my course, I don't really listen to anymore or engage with a lot. So it took me a while, I think, coming out of studying it to be like, well, what am I doing? What do I want to play? What opportunities are there for me to play music that feels authentic and feels good? And I struggled with a lot of imposter syndrome and just a lot of feeling a bit lost and not really knowing where to put my energies, or, I knew I didn't feel like I got good at uni. I feel like I just kind of got the tools to get good, but I didn't know how to put them into practice, and being part of this band in its early days introduced me to a lot of people who were making really interesting music, who were really lovely and warm and welcoming, who wanted to be part of something. And it was really a turning point in my career to go, cool. This is how I work it out. I play with these people. I build these connections. I build myself a world in which I can make music safely, comfortably, in an exciting way, in a way that's going to push me, but in a way that's going to be safe as well. And so, yeah, that group of people that are in or around that Jazzlab Orchestra have also become the people that we book each other for other gigs. We play in each other's other projects. We share music in many, many ways, not just in that ensemble, and mutually encourage each other. And, Gemma Horbury plays trumpet in the band. She's one of the most incredible supporters of that band, of the other things that I do. I've got a trio called Trip with Sean Rammers, and also Ronnie Farella. And like, she's just gives us amazing support, and she programs at La Mama and has had us for some really cool gigs. And then, conversely, I just love the things that Gemma does. She makes amazing new music and is an incredible improviser and poet, and has introduced me to this whole other pocket of music making, and that's just one example. But everyone in that band's got amazing things that they bring to each other's kind of world, and just has become this amazing tapestry of incredible musicians that I get to be part of. So it has absolutely become my core community in this kind of scene, in this Melbourne jazz world, of people who are exciting to be around and to make music with, which is pretty awesome. And it's such a thrill every time I get to introduce a new person to that family, whether it's as an audience member or as a dep, or as someone who, Jess Marler recently came in and brought her suite that she wrote for her honours, which was called Bell Street. And it's this incredible, I think the term she gave it was improvisation by conduction. So there's 3 written movements with sort of skeletons, and then all these built-in gestures, you know, of like when to take a solo, when to play this stab, when to play this little loop. There's all these different sections that she cues, almost like the band is like an Ableton Live controller.
Yes.
You know, and so she'll press this and go, okay, set that in motion, set this in motion, interact with all these different things, stop things, start things. That was a really cool project that I wouldn't have got to necessarily play her music otherwise, but she reached out and I was like, this sounds amazing. And so yeah, it's been a great way to just get to connect everyone. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, so when it came to writing, you know, your old song Cloud Gazing, and when the others, you know, put their compositions together, like what's the process that you have when you're doing that? Are you writing tunes that you're doing with your other projects or your solo stuff, and then reworking it for the band, or is it a specifically written song? I know we can talk about Cloud Gazing in particular, or some other stuff that, you know, is not recorded but that you've done with the band, whatever you'd prefer. But I'd just like to sort of know a bit more about like your process. And
Totally. No, I'd love to. And yeah, Cloud Gazing's a good one to talk about. This is the first piece I ever wrote for a big band.
Oh, right.
Which was cool. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm excited.
Well, it's a great piece. I really like it.
Thank you. And yeah, sort of it's become a bit of a staple in the set. And yeah, I was reasonably chuffed when everyone was like, yeah, let's call the album Cloud Gazing after that, which was kind of nice. But yeah, I sort of just sat down and went, what do I love about big bands, and what do I want it to sound like? And I didn't feel constrained to make it any type of music in particular, you know. Excuse me. The band's largely unconstrained by genre conventions, which is fun. And so for that tune, I was sort of coming from I was playing a lot of folk music at the time. I was playing at the time it was a 5-piece band called the Beam Project, and spending a lot of time on the folk scene at folk festivals.
Yep.
So that was very much influencing what I was listening to, and therefore what I was putting out. And I just knew I wanted to make this like really simple soaring melody, because lots of our pieces are very intricate and very complex, but often, you know, do have those like simple melodies at their core. I mean, I think every good song in some way comes from that, whether it's deconstructing that, building on it, extrapolating. A good simple melody goes a long way in almost every type of music, you know. So yeah, I just sort of knew that I wanted a big soaring melody that was, you know, relatively straightforward and relatively uncomplicated, and something that just sort of sat, you know, in a moment, sort of captured one specific feeling. It's kind of, yeah, it was where I was coming from. But yeah, I can't remember what I sort of put down first or what idea came in first, but it did sort of come together just piece by piece in a very organic way. So I didn't necessarily have a vision for the A to B. And I mean, it's not a hugely complex work. It is more of that classic like head solos head, much more than anything else in that set. But it stands out in the set in that band because it's one of few pieces that actually does. Which is kind of fine too.
And it has a really nice arc to it, you know, because you have your figure, like the instrumental backing figure, and then it sort of comes through and it develops with like the improvisations as well, but like your arranging sort of like really builds and grows as it like comes through. So, you know, like how do you go about shaping that stuff where it's like a combination of, well, there's space for like an improvised group to be playing improvised music, but also I think I want it to go in this direction, and so I'm going to shape it like that.
Yeah, it's it was a really organic process. Like I just kind of I think I spent so much time playing in big bands that I could just kind of, I wrote melody and the little bass figure and the little piano ostinato, and that all came together really well. And then I sort of knew that I wanted to ramp up in the bridge with a bit more of the kind of bit of more support from the woodwinds and getting to just really flourish, I guess, like have a simple melody that just had all these flourishes, and then sort of settle down again. Knowing that anyone would play like a beautiful solo over those changes, it's really fun to sort of open up and be like, yep, here's just a really simple kind of backing figure, really simple space. And then the guitar solo, I just kind of, Rowan Patterson was playing guitar at the time and plays the solo on the record, and Stella now plays in the band. Stella Anning also is always awesome on this tune. I just sort of left it really open and just did the rhythm section, which in big bands, again, like you've got all these voices that you want to involve everyone and be utilizing that. But sometimes it's nice just to drop away and be like, let's just let the rhythm section have a moment, So dropping the horns out totally, and just going, let's have a big expansive guitar solo is kind of fun, and it's just the sort of music that I really enjoy. It's like listening to a good raging guitar solo is always a good time, So yeah, but it was kind of nice just to give the rhythm section space just to be the feature there, in a large ensemble, which doesn't always happen often. It's like, here are the horns with their accompanying rhythm section. So I really enjoyed just creating a little space to highlight them as well. But a lot of, in addition to kind of thinking about my jazz influences and folk influences in terms of writing that melody, the music that I spend the most time listening to is video game music a lot of the time. So right. Very much the idea of like capturing just a little moment and a little scene and a little energy without necessarily a full narrative in that work felt very video gamey. Felt very, like Super Mario 64, Bob on Battlefield. Like it had movements and moments, but it's like one distinct flavor, one distinct scene that's being captured that you could sit in, that had enough movement to create interest and give shape, but that still you felt present in this moment for the duration of the song. I think was kind of the driving kind of motive, I guess.
Are you saying like video game music because you're playing video games or listening to the music in particular? I mean, mostly from a lifetime of playing video games. Okay. More recently listening to it, more from a musical standpoint. But yeah, it's just been absorbed, I think, through decades of video gaming. Well, what about, like I know it's a long time since you've written Between Worlds, but you've just like recorded it. You happy talking about like the compositional, elements and stuff for that suite too? Totally. So yeah, in 2021 I was lucky enough to have the take note role, the role of take note leader with the Melbourne Jazz Festival, which is a role given to like an early career musician of a minority gender, which basically is a commission to write a new work, a debut performance at the festival, and also has an educational kind of aspect where you're going to schools and presenting workshops and that sort of thing. Although, while I really enjoyed the workshops, I think I got to do 2 before we went back into lockdown. I didn't get to do the rest of the year of that, which was a bit of a shame, but I enjoyed what I did get to do. And but yeah, then I had this big project I had to write, and it was interesting because I've written songs or pieces for years. So I was an adult when someone pointed out that a song, like by definition, is sung, so therefore has voice and usually lyrics, and I was like, oh, that's the distinction. So I've written some songs and some pieces, I guess, but works, music stuff for various people. But I, up until that moment, had only written like an individual song. Pretty much like every band I've been in, I've written like a song or 2 for that band. But I've never set about writing a whole album or a whole suite or a whole big work in one kind of go, So this was quite exciting as a notion to be like, okay, I've got to write an entire set of music. And pretty early on, I knew that I wanted that to have a cohesive narrative, unlike sort of writing Cloud Gazing, where I wanted to just capture like one feeling and just sit in that feeling. I was like, yeah, I want to write something that's got narrative, that's got movement, that goes from A to B through the set in a really purposeful way. And I mean, given that I had this brilliant opportunity with the festival to put together a dream band, I was like, well, I really loved some of Johannes Luber's Dectet. Well, I love all of it, but I had been listening particularly to some of Johannes's
dectet stuff and a few other kind of medium-sized ensembles. Played a lot of big bands, done a lot of small combo stuff, but I haven't had a lot of opportunity to play in or write for like that kind of 8 to 10 musicians size of ensemble. So I was like, well, let's go. Let's put together an octet. Let's put together the dream team and write for that. So I sort of saw that as an opportunity to write for a larger ensemble that otherwise is very difficult to fund and find space for. So I had a vision for the sorts of sounds and the sorts of ensemble that I wanted, and the overarching kind of scaffolding of a narrative suite. And then we went into lockdown. So my usual sources of inspiration, like going to gigs, playing with people, that sort of thing, were all sort of removed. And it was a lot of time sort of staring at walls. But it was sort of an interesting time as well in 2021, in that we were in and out of lockdown. But I was also grappling with my gender and how that looked, because up until that time, as far as I knew, I'd sort of just been living this life as a woman, which is an interesting thing when you're labelled as a female musician and you do things that female musicians do, and you can be the token female musician in a band. And you play in all female bands. Like, there's a lot of really important conversations happening about visibility and the presence of women in the jazz scene that have been happening for an ungodly long time, with very slow change, very slow results, and those conversations are so important, and I've been so passionately part of them, but I've always been a little uncomfortable in that role, and I think many cisgender women are uncomfortable being labelled that way in some environments, so I don't think that's uncommon, but it became apparent to me that my discomfort was that I'm not a woman, and that took some getting used to, navigating and unpacking. And meanwhile, I'd been given this take note role thing, sort of, it's always been very clear that it's for women with an expansive concept of what women are, which is why I tend to describe it as a program for people of minority gender. But it was kind of like a woman in jazz as a thing.
Yes. And
I was like, oh God, I'm doing this thing and I don't even feel like I should be. And anyway, but the festival were amazing. And of course, like, even more reason that you should be as a trans person. Like, there's not a lot of visibility for trans and non-binary people in the jazz scene because there just aren't that many of us, especially in Melbourne. It's a small scene anyway. When you then divide that by, cut that down to people who are in any minority gender, and then cut that down further to the trans and non-binary folks, there's not a lot of us. So it was quite lovely to have that support from them. But yeah, so all of a sudden I've got this grant to write this work. I've got this vague plan. We go into lockdown. And I come out as trans, and what do you do with that? You sit at home and try to write music, and so I was not writing. When I started writing it, it wasn't with the narrative planned. It all emerged over time as I was going. But I was writing music and also thinking very deeply about gender, about the jazz scene, about the world that I might or might not fit into, about the jazz festival, about what it means to be an artist for the Melbourne International Jazz Festival, what it means to be a non-binary artist, and about, again, coming back to, that idea of, classical music versus jazz music, or what any of that kind of means. And Between Worlds was really just a working title, because that was kind of what I was thinking about at the time, what was influencing what I was writing, but it became more and more obvious that was to be the title of the suite, because I was like navigating what genres I fitted into or didn't fit into, and what gender I did or didn't fit into, and so it became like an album about navigating gender and genre, and didn't have any answers, but it was an interesting way to pose those questions to myself and to see myself navigating that through music. But yeah, I didn't sort of sit down and go, I'm going to write a 6-piece suite about being a non-binary musician. I just spent a few months in lockdown writing an album, and that's what was going on for me at the time. But it all coalesced into this work that I'm very proud of, and just thoroughly enjoyed playing. So yeah, but the process was much more magpie-y, I guess. Like just grabbing shiny things and. So yeah, in terms of building a big work, I did just like every day I'd sit down and just sort of try to write something, whether it was taking an idea I already had and developing it, or writing something new. I was doing lots of little composing exercises. I had all these folders of voice memos and notation and song inspirations and little loops that I'd built, and I just put them all in a big thing. And I didn't try to finish anything right away. I just collected ideas for quite some time. A lot of lockdown was just, oh, another idea, put it in the barrel, put them, and just let them kind of sit there. And then I, if I was feeling like I wasn't in a space to like make a new thing, okay, well, let's go back through. And I just go back and listen to them until I found something interesting. Be like, oh, let's flesh that melody out with some, let's try harmonizing it. Or here's some chords that I like, but I don't have a melody over it. Let's sit with that and see if I can write a melody over it. Or let's see if I can find two ideas that maybe would work together and I can start to patchwork it together. So it sort of just all went in the melting pot. And then I gradually just pulled bits out until it started to make sense. And gradually that became the suite,
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It must have been like an extra like intensity doing it all on your own in lockdown. Like we've spoken so much about like how much you like being with other people. So then to be just trying to like do a work, but in lockdown where you're like completely isolated, but also then grappling with, all the other things that you're thinking about as like who you are, must have just been such like an amplified, I suppose, experience.
Yeah, it was quite isolating. But also I think it was important because I so rarely spend time alone, because I will seek out every opportunity to be in the company of others. It probably was really good for me, but it was really hard work. And there were plenty of days where it just felt like I was never going to get it written. Especially, it's very easy now to look back and be like, well, of course, we couldn't stay in lockdown forever. And one way or another, we were going to have some sort of real world to emerge to. At the time, it felt like I could put all this in and the gig gets cancelled or never gets to go ahead. The festival, and it did. The original festival got canned, but then was postponed, and eventually we did get to play the gig in December instead of October. But it felt a little hopeless, And so I mean, maybe partly the kind of gathering approach to writing, it didn't put so much pressure on because it just meant that I had plenty of ideas and there was going to be something there.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like I was really having too much of a vision for it, because it felt unsafe to have a perfect vision of how something might play out at that time, because it was like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Everything felt uncertain. But yeah, it was a very strange and isolating and frustrating way to make music. And I wouldn't do it that way again, I vastly prefer to be able to go and try things and run things by people, and even just like if you've got a melodic idea, like, if you've got a moment in a tune to like try something out, playing things and trying ideas, and I really like this harmony, I want to try some things over it, trying it on a gig and being like, yeah, that felt good. Those things really do feed back into my writing more often than not. So yeah, it was an unusual experience for me in terms of how to write, but it was cool. It was a cool experience to have had, and I think I developed techniques to overcome that isolation and that lack of the usual inspiration that are useful, going forward as well. So it's kind of, it's interesting time. Yeah.
So what's it been like going through the whole recording process? Because you recorded the suite last year, and you were just saying that, like, it's finished being mixed and mastered and stuff. Like, does it feel like a big bookend to the whole process that was, I don't know, a lot more positive than the difficulties of the writing?
Totally. Exactly so, and even, when we debuted it at the festival, we sort of like had done the writing and we rehearsed it up and the band were awesome. And even on stage I was like, oh wow, yeah, now I've got to play it, kind of thing. Like actually getting to play it was this almost shock to the system in a good way, but just like, oh cool, I get to actually live in this music now.
Yeah.
But we did another show of it a year later back at the Jazzlab as well. And after that I was like, okay, now I feel ready to record it. Like I wasn't ready to go straight in and record it after that first performance. Like it just felt so raw and so fresh, and I just needed to like, sit with it and become really comfortable in that music. So we did a second gig in 2022, and that was great. And then I was like, cool, let's do this thing. And then it took us a long time to find a time that all 8 people were free, which is the other thing about running an 8-piece band. But yeah, eventually did line up some time to record it late last year, and it was awesome. It was almost cathartic, to go and sit in the studio and actually lay down this sort of realized version, this like rehearsed up realized version of it. And I have always found being in the studio quite anxiety inducing. It's not a space that I feel comfortable in.
Okay.
It has none of the buzz of a stage.
Right.
And it has too much opportunity to try to get things perfect and kind of go down. We were talking about, even with recording podcasts earlier, it's easy to kind of go down the well of wanting to perfectly execute something.
Yeah.
It's a trap to want to then, let's just retake that bit, or, but usually the first version's better because it's got the vibe, or maybe the second take. After that, they don't get better, they don't improve. Because you just get stuck in, last time I did this other bit that I liked better, especially when you're improvising. I really liked what I did over that B section. So you're trying to recapture that rather than being in the new moment, or trying to get something perfect and then you fuck something else up. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast, but bleep me out if you Luke in the editing room. But, you start to fixate and it doesn't improve. The vibe goes down, I think. And so, but I'm a bit too conscious of everything, I think, when I'm in the studio, and I want everyone else to be feeling comfortable and having a good time, and make sure everyone else feels good about their parts, and I tend to put my own parts last until suddenly it's important, and then I'm stressed, and then it can be a complicated space for me to navigate. And it's not something that I necessarily relish. Like, I don't look forward to spending time recording. I look forward to gigs. But actually I had a great time in the studio, and I was still a little on edge, and still a stressful and high intensity environment, but the band are also amazing, and just so lovely to be around, that so many nice things happened while we were just there and hanging out. There was one lunch where I think I missed the beginning of the conversation. But Celine Messinas, who plays keys on the album.
Oh yes.
One of my the whole band is, I could say about any person in that band, one of my favorite people in Melbourne. But Celine is, and she was like really advocating for muti tin tomatoes.
Oh, okay.
She was just feels like, Nonna's picked them freshly from the vine. Like, they're the supreme tin tomato. Anything else pales in comparison. And so then, like, the next day, Oscar sort of came in with a tin of muti for her. Right. It sort of became this thread, so we had dinner at the culmination of everything, and Celine cooked us all pasta. And we had some, So just sort of these little threads, as always will occur when a group of friends get together. And it just, we had so many little moments like that where things just were delightful through those couple of days of recording. And Rowan Swarzino, who was the engineer and did the mixing, it was just so easygoing, and also like grew up in the jazz world and is also a bit jazz adjacent, and but is doing amazing stuff, mixing and mastering at Head Gap. But was just so chill and understanding and patient, and just willing to offer advice and support when we needed it, but also just kind of let us do the thing. And a large part of the quality of the product and how happy I was with the recording in the end was due to his like energy as well, just being a really positive influence. Like there was no one actually there being like, oh, you got to get this right, or or also sometimes engineers will be like, oh, maybe you should do that again, or and it's all well-meaning, but it sort of can play on my heightened anxiety. But everyone was so relaxed and chill, and it was great. So it did very much feel like this. It took me some time to get to the point where I was ready to record it, and then we got this like wonderful closure on it. Recorded the thing and mixed it up, and Lachlan Carrick's mastered it up, and my brother's partner, Marnie, did the artwork, which is really beautiful as well. And I sort of said to her, look, I know the kind of energy I want from it, but I'm not an artist, I'm not a visual artist, and I'm very happy to sit down and hash out some ideas, or if you feel comfortable, I'd just love you to, like, here's the recording, like, and the general colour palette and vibe that I'm going for in some other album art that I like, that has the kind of energy I'm looking for. If you feel like you just want to kind of go for it, anything you come up with will be amazing. Like, cool. But I'm happy to be as involved or not. And she said, oh, no, great, and sent me this thing. I was just like, this is perfect. And this gorgeous artwork that everyone will see when I release it. But so it's all kind of ready to go now. I just got to get it done.
Awesome.
Which is really fun.
Oh, well, I'd love to just keep asking you questions.
Please.
But I'm trying to keep the podcasts in like this tight 45.
No worries.
So I'll just have to have you back.
No worries. Do part 2.
Yeah, I would love to. Because it's just so great, like, hearing about all that you're doing. And you were such, like, it was interesting hearing you say, like, that you didn't feel that you were that great at jazz school. But when I was with you, like, you were an amazing musician there. and you were always so lovely and kind to me and super supportive, and it's just great to see like how much success you've had like with your own personal music and the opportunities that you've had, but also like, you know, you're now a renowned session trombonist, like just playing in so many different areas, like having so much success. It's really great to see like how far you've come. Not that you weren't good before, but like, you know, I feel like you've really like come into your own. It's
very
great.
kind. No, and it feels like that for me too. But you know, the feeling's absolutely mutual. You're one of the people that made me feel the safest at uni, and you were always just such a delight to play with and hang out with, and both musically and personally inspiring. And it's just, yeah, it's lovely to get to sit down and chat music with you. You know, it's really cool.
Oh, thanks, Elliot.
And this is a great project. You know, I'm really psyched to hear all the other episodes, and I'm really glad you're doing this. I think it's awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been a fun project, so it'll be nice to have it out.
Totally.
I've been playing this game. It's a fun thing, I guess, about this podcast that we're doing now. Like, we're quite a few episodes in, but no one's heard anything, so nobody knows.
No one's got the context for the game yet.
I'm doing some like regular things, but I'm the only person who knows what's going on.
Who knows it's regular? That's great.
Anyway, so I'm playing this like process of like guests questioning the next guest.
Nice.
Somehow I've got things out of order, and I've got 2 questions going live.
Great.
So I'm going to give you the question from Tony Floyd.
Great. Wow, that is a great question. Great question. I think I'll answer the second part first. I don't think I'd change instruments. Because I'm such a trombone player. It just feels right, you know? Trombone players are just a type of person. I mean, no, that's a huge oversimplification, but I just feel like I get trombone players and they get me, you know? There's something about the community of it, and I just can't see myself identifying as anything other than a trombone player. But if I could get as good on something else, I feel like it's such an obvious answer, but I can't think of anything other than piano that I would want to be as good at. Okay. Purely compositionally.
Yeah, right.
I just would love to have that mastery of a piano where I can like play out harmony in real time and self-accompany and have all these amazing musical skills that would come with being a really good piano player. Which is perhaps not the most inventive or interesting, but just would be the most practical thing for me to be really good at. It's either that or just like the theremin. You know what I mean? Like it's got to be an extreme.
That's true. That one is more slightly left of field.
Like a digital trombone, right? It's like anyway. But it would be piano. But not to be a pianist, just to be able to execute music in that incredible way that only pianists can. Yeah.
All right, well, what would you like to ask the next guest?
Oh my goodness, that is equally stressful and fun. What would I ask someone? What would I want to be asked? Or not want to be asked, because I don't have to answer it. Man, that's tricky. I'm assuming you can edit out the long silence.
I can take out
or
some
you can
pauses.
not, depending on how tight we are to that 45.
I guess it depends how dramatic the question's going to be.
That's
like
it, exactly. How much build up do we get? I'm sure it's not going to be dramatic. If you could, here's my question. If you could record with one person from history, like music history, of a previous era, who would you sit down and record with?
That's really interesting.
I'll be interested to hear what someone has to say about it.
Yeah. I wonder who'll get the question.
That's it, exactly. You possibly know, but I don't, and that's the fun thing.
All right, well, final segment of the podcast. 5 quick fire questions.
All right.
So what is your favourite venue to play in Melbourne?
The Jazzlab.
What would be your dream venue to perform at?
Ooh, the Forum, probably.
The Forum's getting a few shout-outs.
Nice, yeah. I can see that.
My dream venue, I reckon, too.
Totally. Well, my partner and I went to see G-Flip on their drummer tour.
Oh, yeah.
Last year, and they got we were there on the night that they got the forum tattooed on their arm during the show.
Okay.
It's like, I
Cool.
vibe with that.
Yeah.
Like, and their grandmother was there because they were like, if I ever play the forum, you've got to be there now, sort of thing. And Nan had like a seat up the top. It was awesome. Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, I vibe with that energy of, it's just a great venue.
Yeah, it really is. And all the little stories like that, like, and because so many different genres play there.
Totally.
And everyone's got a story like that one. I was there for the gig where this happened.
This happened, exactly.
Yeah. All right, what is your coffee order?
Soy latte, because I'm from Melbourne.
What's your favourite place to get food after a gig?
When I'm playing at the Jazzlab, if I've got time either before or after, getting tacos at Los Hermanos is a classic.
Do you get food before you play gigs as a trombonist?
Not immediately if I can help it.
Okay.
Try and have a little bit of breathing space.
Yep.
Or digesting space.
All right, and what's one piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self?
My gut instinct was that I would be like, it's okay, you're trans, you're going to work it all out. But then it's like, maybe I needed to go on the journey to work that out for myself. But maybe that would be the advice. But I think just in general, like, you're going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
It's probably the extent of it.
Well, Ellie, where can people like connect with you and hear your music?
So the Jazzlab Orchestra released their album late last year, which is called Cloud Gazing, and that's on your standard streaming services. Or you can help us out and buy it on Bandcamp. And Between Worlds will be released imminently. Chatting with Ronnie and Sean about putting out a trip album as well, and that might all be bundled together in some way with some other cool artists as well. So when we work out exactly how we're releasing it, we will be letting everyone know. But I'm on Instagram at Elliot Lamb Music, is usually where I put all my stuff. So you can find me there. All my music's coming out as Elliot Lamb, which I'm sort of transitioning to using as my full name, but I'm still using Ellie and L and whatever else. But yeah, my music will be out under Elliot Lamb, but my Instagram handle is Elliot Lamb Music.
Cool. And what about anyone who wants to book you as a session trombonist or like teacher or something? Is that through the same channels?
Yeah, elliotlambmusic@gmail.com or on Instagram. Hit me up and yeah, we'll have a play.
Awesome. Oh, well, thanks so much for doing the podcast, Ellie. It's been really lovely.
It's been an absolute treat, Luke. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed getting to know another Melbourne muso like I did. Help us grow by leaving a review, share the podcast with friends and family, and subscribe on our website for extra info. Got a guest you'd love to hear on the show? Please let us know at ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.